Hello, my name is Ken Wille from KOW Building Consultants, an engineering, consulting, and building inspection firm based in New York City with a national outreach. Today, I'm here to talk to you about 5 things to look for in the 2024 multifamily market. So let's get started. Number one, where are we starting from? Well, it's good to say that coming out of 2023, the economy was actually much more resilient than a lot had expected. So that's a good sign. The recession that we heard about through pretty much the last 18 months just never came last year. And there are a lot of indicators showing better strength and better numbers that we anticipated. Unemployment is historically at a low under 4%. That's been the case for some time. And I don't think you have to look very far to find companies that will talk about frustrations with hiring, expansion, and finding good people. Certainly, it's a good time to find a job. So unemployment being at a historical low under 4% is certainly good for a job seeker, not as good if you have a lot of spots to fill. Consumer spending was also stronger than anticipated through last year. We've heard a lot of things about the office market, which is a whole different webinar based on what we could talk about, as well as the death of retail. It actually hasn't been quite as bad as that. Certainly, there's going to be some retail that you might not see come back with things like Amazon and one-click pay, but stronger than expected consumer spending was certainly good for all areas of the country. High inflation, although a great worry over the last few years, has really come down from its peak. One of the things we note in representing financial institutions is that they don't like volatility, they don't like surprises, and they don't like risk that wasn't properly assessed. High inflation really turned that card over the last few years, but I'm glad to say it's come down to pretty much business as usual, just our normal things to keep an eye on as we enter 2024. I'm also pleased to say that supply chain and other pandemic issues are largely a thing of the past. Certainly, there's still things we're keeping an eye on as far as long lead. If for those of you in ground up, you know that electrical switchgear, big custom facade projects, big custom HVAC equipment, you're going to keep an eye on lead items for that. But certainly it's not near as bad as it was during or even coming out of the pandemic. I'd also say that there's modest economic gains expected for 2024. It seems like the last few years we've heard cautiously optimistic. I really think people mean it entering January 1st this year. Number two, remote working is here to stay. The pandemic push out of the cities into the secondary and tertiary markets has had a national impact. Take a look and see where the work is and where people have moved. It's where your dollar goes further. It's gotten out of the urban areas, and we think that's here to stay. It's not here to stay because the pandemic's over or we have another pandemic coming. It's because of technology. That's what's made it possible. We were really all forced to work in a different way, and I don't think we're ever going to get that genie back in the bottle. I think what you see is the best and smartest companies are having some sort of hybrid where management and ownership is talking to the workers, trying to work out a relationship and an understanding of what best to do for both parties. But that technology has made it possible, and that's not going back anytime soon. I'd say look for continued growth outside these major city markets. In fact, if you look at the top markets in order coming out of 2023, you notice you don't see New York, you don't see LA, you don't see Chicago. It's Dallas, Fort Worth, San Diego, Tampa, Houston, Fort Lauderdale, a lot of Southerns, Florida, Texas, Charlotte, Las Vegas. A lot of those markets are really booming right now, evidenced by where people have moved and where they're going to stay. Record new supply, something to keep an eye on. By the end of 2024, nearly 900,000 apartments will have opened since the beginning of last year. That's a big number. So let's keep an eye on where this is. It's mostly in those secondary and tertiary markets. Again, your dollar goes further. Maybe you don't have as big of vertical projects as your big urban centers, but land's cheaper. Cost of living is more attractive, certainly for a young and mobile workforce. And you're going to see that most in your secondary and tertiary markets. But also keep an eye on this on a case-by-case basis. We're seeing this when you see certain cities and towns in the Rust Belt that are doing better than others. Those that are more open to development, rezoning areas, downtown, your rail cities, case by case, there's a lot of very attractive things for developers. And if the workers can go there, can work remotely, perhaps do some traveling to the urban centers for meetings, etc., but their dollar goes a lot further, I think you're going to see evidence that that's a thing here to stay. I'd also point out that the office to residential conversions, that's something that you heard a lot coming out of the pandemic. Who wants to build office now? We all want to be in residential, so move the office space into a residential space. A lot harder than it sounds. You have light and air and other areas that are a big concern. It's not quite as easy as it sounds. We've seen some, but certainly there's not been a mad rush from office to resi conversions. Although something to keep an eye on. It's not as simple as it once seemed like it was. I'd also note that 5.4 vacancy in the residential world from a sub 5% in 2022. That's a pretty standard number right there. That's come up a little, but it's pretty much in the same sort of area. Another thing to keep an eye on, but we don't believe that's going to move much by the end of this year. Rates will or may come down. If I had done this a few months ago, I would have said will come down. I'm going to say may come down because of people a lot smarter than I am that I read about that say from an economic standpoint, rates are not a guarantee to come down. Some people have predicted 6 months ago, oh, in 2024, we're going to have 3 or 4 rate cuts. We don't know. A soft landing is likely, and we might have some rate cut activity, but job growth is expected at 2/3 the rate of 2023, which was robust. So that's a good sign. I'd say look for modest rate cuts action in 2024, but not as significant as we would have predicted, say, 6 or 8 months ago. Also, this is something when you consider affordability, which is still a major issue in the multifamily market. That's something that has become harder and harder with pricing going up, with inflation, and it's something we're keeping an eye on in how it relates to rate cuts. It all is about affordability, and that's something I don't think that anyone in this market would say is something they've got figured out. It's still a big concern. And lastly, watch the underwriting. Capital's available. There is money that's ready to come into the marketplace. And some banks have indicated they've got an increased appetite for risk and for lending, or if not for risk, at least the right scenario. However, underwriting criteria has tightened. It's something that's still going to be a difficult water to navigate. So something to keep an eye on as your deals go. Certainly, they're going to take longer. There's going to be more that has to be done to make it pencil out. Borrowing costs are high, and that's still going to stay the same heading throughout this year. So what do we think? Cash rich or existing customers have the advantage. More of a known quantity, you're a lot more attractive than an unknown, certainly as a bank starts to get back into the water, and we're seeing that as something that happens throughout this year. Also look for lending dependency from government-sponsored entities, Fannie, Fannie, to mention a few. It's something we think, as the experts are predicting, you're going to see increased activity from them as this year unfolds. That's all for now. Visit kowbc.com for any information. I'm Ken Wille. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.